Most gardeners make the mistake of choosing mulch purely for appearance or weed suppression, ignoring the soil life underneath. The reality is that your choice of mulch directly affects the worms in your garden, and if you get it wrong, your soil suffers. Worms are not just a bonus, they're a core indicator of soil health. When mulch drives them away or slows their activity, nutrients don't cycle efficiently, the soil compacts faster, and plants don't grow as vigorously as they should. I've seen it happen in raised beds, backyard plots, and even in controlled hydroponic systems with organic substrates. Ignoring how mulch interacts with worms has real consequences for productivity. If you want to maximize soil life and long-term fertility, subscribe to the channel. Over the next few minutes, we'll dive into what actually works when it comes to encouraging worms with mulch, based on years of observation and experimentation. Different mulches create radically different worm environments. Not all organic mulches are equal. Straw, shredded leaves, grass clippings, and wood chips all behave differently in the soil, and worms respond accordingly. In my tests, a thick layer of fresh wood chips applied straight from the bag will suppress worm activity for months. Worms avoid the sharp, dry edges and the high carbon content until decomposition begins. On the other hand, finely chopped straw or leaf mulch creates an ideal environment, especially when applied in 1/2-inch to 1-inch layers. These mulches retain moisture, are easy for worms to ingest, and don't form a barrier that keeps them from moving freely through the soil. In a small backyard raised bed, I've used 1/2-inch layers of chopped straw around tomatoes and peppers, and within 2 weeks worm casts appear directly under the mulch. That's the real test. If you're seeing worm activity, you're feeding both the plants and the soil at the same time. Wood chips eventually work, but you need to pre-compost them or mix them with nitrogen-rich material like grass clippings or green waste to prevent nutrient tie-up while decomposition starts. Moisture levels under mulch make or break worm activity. Worms are sensitive to moisture. Mulches that dry out quickly, like large wood chips or thick bark, can create a desert layer on top of perfectly good soil. I've seen raised beds mulched with 3 inches of bark where worms practically vanish until rainfall or irrigation saturates the layer. In contrast, chopped leaves or straw hold water near the soil surface, allowing worms to move freely and feed. A practical ratio I use is to apply organic mulch in layers no thicker than 1 inch at a time, then check moisture after a few days. If it dries quickly, lightly water it to maintain a damp but not soggy environment. This creates a perfect microclimate for worms, particularly in hotter months when soil can dry rapidly. I've found that combining leaf mulch with a thin layer of grass clippings on top keeps the soil consistently moist and encourages rapid worm activity throughout the growing season. So, temperature matters as much as moisture, you know. Mulch acts as insulation, but not all materials regulate temperature equally. Light-colored straw actually allows the soil underneath to warm gradually in spring, which stimulates worm activity early in the season. On the other hand, dark, dense mulches like fresh wood chips hold cold in the soil for longer, delaying worm movement and microbial breakdown. For early season crops, I really prefer a lighter mulch that encourages worms to start feeding and moving immediately, improving nutrient availability for seedlings. By midsummer, though, I'll switch to denser materials where the goal is moisture retention rather than heat regulation. Worm activity is a signal you can track, and honestly, it informs mulch strategy. I've kept small observation plots across different mulch types, checking for worm casts, surface movement, and soil softness weekly. In plots with finely chopped leaves, worms increase by roughly 20 to 30% within a month compared to bare soil. Straw plots show similar increases, though slightly slower. Wood chips and bark require pre-composting for 3 to 6 months before worm populations spike. Tracking worm activity this way is far more informative than just guessing which mulch is best. You can combine mulches strategically to maximize worm activity. One approach I've tested extensively is layering a base of chopped leaves or straw for worms and moisture retention, with a top layer of grass clippings or pre-composted wood chips to reduce evaporation and suppress weeds. In raised beds, I apply a half-inch layer of chopped leaves first, then a quarter-inch of grass clippings on top. Worms move freely in the bottom layer while the top layer provides a protective cover. This combination encourages steady decomposition and avoids the pitfalls of single-material mulches, like nutrient tie-up from pure wood chips or rapid drying from straw alone. Chemical treatments in mulch can kill worms before you even notice. A mistake I see repeatedly is using treated wood chips or bagged mulches that have residual herbicides or fungicides. Worms are extremely sensitive to these chemicals, and even a small concentration can reduce their activity dramatically. For edible gardens, stick to untreated or fully composted materials. If you must use bagged mulch, check for organic certification or, pre-compost it for several months before application. I've run side-by-side tests showing almost total suppression of worms in treated wood chip plots compared to untreated leaf mulch. The lesson is simple. Your soil life is more valuable than aesthetics. Hydroponic systems require a slightly different approach, but the same principles really do apply. Even though soil is minimal or sometimes completely absent, worm activity in supplemental media can actually be beneficial for organic hydro systems. I've experimented with partially decomposed leaf mulch integrated into hydro media to encourage microbe-rich biofilms that sort of mimic soil ecology. Now, worms aren't living in water, of course, but the decomposition of mulch encourages beneficial bacteria and fungi that would otherwise take much longer to establish in hydro substrates. The takeaway here is pretty consistent. Organic matter drives microbial activity, and worms are a visible, reliable proxy for soil or substrate health. Or long-term worm activity, honestly, it correlates with healthier, more resilient gardens. Beds that maintain consistent worm populations experience faster nutrient cycling, improved soil structure, and better water infiltration. I've compared adjacent plots over multiple seasons, one with regular leaf and straw mulch, one with thick bark, and one bare. The mulched beds with active worms consistently produce larger, more vigorous crops with less supplemental fertilizer. That's the proof right there. Encouraging worms through thoughtful mulch selection and monitoring isn't just theoretical, it directly translates into better harvests. In practice, you want to think of mulch as both shelter and food for worms. Fine, moisture-retaining material at the soil interface encourages movement and feeding. Denser materials are protective and slow decomposition. Rotate layers, track activity, and avoid chemicals. Over a season, you'll see your beds transform richer soil, more worm casts, and crops that require less intervention. So if your goal is a garden that thrives year after year, start observing worms track their response to different mulches and adjust your layers accordingly. This is how experienced gardeners consistently improve soil health and productivity. The worms are the signal, mulch is the tool, and your observations dictate strategy. If you want more practical, hands-on strategies for improving soil life and getting the most out of your garden, subscribe to the Farm Logic channel and share this video. Every tip we cover is tested in real gardens, raised beds, and organic hydro systems, because improving soil and supporting worms isn't theory, it's measurable results you can see season after season.